Great. Well, thank you very much. I'm thrilled to be here. Really thrilled. I'm curious about what kind of footprint I've left. My children will tell you on their backsides. There's quite a few. So this is a great morning. I'm so excited that we've got people from all across the country here, and I'm here to do a little bit of a walk through what Imagine a School could be like, because we're at an absolutely phenomenal time in Ontario's education. I am a person who believes very strongly that what we need to be thinking about more and more in education is the power of relationships. We in Ontario, as many of you know very well, are taking on a bold new journey. We have worked very hard, as you know. Well, I should first of all say, I'm going to say we, that is, we as the royal we. I'm only been connected for a short period of time, other than being the mum of 5 great kids. I've been very involved. So when I talk about we, I'm talking about the will and the thinking of the people of education in Ontario. So we're looking very seriously at not only achievement and equity, making sure that all kids have the opportunity to reach their full potential, but we're also talking about well-being. And I'm, as you heard from David, I'm an advisor to the Minister and Premier of Ontario. I'm very honoured to play that role. And I'm continually asking, are we thinking about building the relationship skills that children need? Are we working with educators so that they know how to build relationships with each other? We have a wonderful group. Andy Hargraves has just written a journal proposal, an article that talks about collaborative professionalism, that I'll read to you his definition. And what in that definition, I want you to imagine a school. I want you to imagine a school and say, I want that in my school. When we think of teachers, educators, deeply thinking about not just what do kids learn, but how do kids learn. Asking not just about how do I get them to think about this, but really thinking deeply about how do people learn how to think. Not what to think, but how to think. So connection is absolutely key in all of this. There's a parallel process, as they talk about in the big fancy world, where what we're thinking about in terms of the teacher-student relationship, that those kids will feel that the teachers deeply care, not only about their achievement, but deeply about their well-being. And what does that well-being mean? How they feel about themselves, their sense of identity. But you know, one of the things that I always want to propose to people when I'm talking is, do we have guiding principles around what education and parenting is all about? And I heard a Mohawk elder, Tom Porter, a number of years ago, and he blew me away, because he talked about the teachings of his grandmother. And his grandmother taught that children are the sacred ones. They are the heart of the nation. It's our sacred responsibility to be raising our children. Now, can you imagine that as a guiding light for Ontario education, that children are our sacred ones? Well, you know, I think if we really thought about what the word child means in Indigenous language, according to Tom, is he or she who has the light within. Can you imagine a world in our education system where we think our role as educators and parents is to let that light shine? How can we let that light shine? Well, we know that you can't let that light shine if you're too frickin' busy stuffing the duck. Now, what do I mean by stuffing the duck? I mean that curriculum that will tell you thou shalt do all of these things, and you completely miss the child in it. Why is it that we have a world where kids are learning, enjoying and playing? Well, they're not playing anymore. That's another time. But they're enjoying all the stuff they do outside of school. That's where the learning is happening. They're excited about, and then they come to school, and what do we say? We don't say, well, what is it that you're bringing? What is it that you're excited about? We say, we're the adults, we know, stuff the duck. Now, in case you don't know about stuffing the duck, it's something that French people and other cultures do to get a big fat liver. We just drink to do it, but others get it. But if we think about the wisdom of the elders as a guiding principle, and so when we think about Ontario's bold new vision of looking not only at achieving excellence and ensuring equity, but promoting well-being, and of course enhancing public confidence, of course. But one of the first meetings that I had with the Premier, I remember it very, very clearly. I'm probably not supposed to talk about it, but it was with Liz Sandals, and she's not there anymore. So anyway, I said, one of my big concerns in the work that we're going to do as advisors is that there are these competing tensions. There's the competing tensions of achievement. And everybody is all about frickin' math these days. Holy cow, Batman, But if we're all about math, how can we also be all about well-being? Is there going to be a tension between creating the conditions where kids thrive and flourish and a tension between we have to get the math scores up? So I'm really absolutely thrilled to say that the team at the Ministry of Education has done a phenomenal job of listening to the work that People for Education has been doing for a number of years in the Measuring What Matters, but also in saying to thousands of people, tell us what you think well-being is. Tell us how we can interconnect achievement with well-being rather than thinking of them separately. And so the definition that was put out in the discussion paper that many of you, I know, if you're here, you probably took part in that discussion, is that well-being is that positive sense of self, spirit and belonging that we feel when our cognitive, emotional, social and physical needs are being met. As our Indigenous partners have long known, healthy development of the mind, body and spirit is contingent on balance and interconnectedness. So our First Nations people, again, we are so privileged to have the conversations that we are able to have. And our Indigenous people have given and shared with us a mental wellness continuum. And I want you to think about this, because it's very profound, there's lots in it. Mental well-being is about having a sense of purpose, a sense of hope, a sense of belonging and meaning in our daily lives. You're going to hear from a phenomenal panel with Nancy Steinauer and her Pushing the Limits book. And in that, I want you to listen to how in so many of the stories, there's an embodiment of a sense of purpose, hope, belonging and meaning in daily life. But here's a challenge. If I'm a teacher and I think that my job is to communicate and help kids learn a particular set of skills or a particular curriculum, cover the content, and then somebody else is coming along, some shrink from McMaster, is coming along and saying, how you are with the kids, who you are with the kids, is really what helps them grow and flourish. When I talk to kindergarten teachers, I ask them, what do you see your role as? Do you see your role as a human developer, as my friend Bruce Ferguson talks? Or do you see your role as somebody preparing kids for grade 1? Now, I can tell you, across the province, there's a great variability. Isn't that part of the kicker? The variability is huge. But if we can keep coming back to teachers having a sense of meaning, having a sense of purpose. I spoke with a group of teachers in Dundas not too long ago, and they said that working with Michael Fullan thinking about actually bringing the competencies into what you do in your classroom. I'll talk about the competencies in a minute. Changed completely their sense of meaning as teachers. They were getting tired of the drudgery of covering curriculum that was boring kids out of their frickin' minds. That's what kids will tell us. What kids have told us is they want relationship. They want connection. They want teachers who care about their learning, not just about the teacher's teaching. So imagine this world, and this is thanks to my friend Dr. Kathy Short from School Mental Health Assist. Imagine this and say, I want this in my school. Imagine that every child and youth in Ontario would receive a warm greeting from staff and fellow students as they arrived at school each day. Imagine. I have a dream, as many of you know, that every single child will have at least one adult whose eyes light up when they enter the room. Imagine that we created the school where that happened every single day for every child. The students would begin the day ready to learn after a check-in from teachers who take the emotional temperature in the classroom prior to starting lessons. I think that we are seeing more and more children, as a child psychiatrist I think this, who are being exposed to trauma, and that we are inadvertently pushing their trauma triggers. But if we started with classrooms that said, I am aware of the invisible relationships in this classroom, the power of my connection to my students is a motivator for learning. Rather than thinking, oh, I don't have time, I've got so much I have to cover. We have to give teachers permission to be able to say, this invisible classroom is also an important one to take from. The students learn and practice social emotional development skills each day at school as part of the regular curriculum. Can you imagine what it would have been like if Donald Trump had learned social and emotional skills at school? Imagine a world. Imagine. But what we know is that the OECD and PISA are now saying we're not measuring the right things anymore, guys. We know that places like South Korea and other countries are doing really well in PISA, but their suicide rates are through the roof. And so PISA, OECD is now looking at social and emotional development and learning as pivotal for successful students who flourish and thrive. The students went out of their way to watch for and help other students through formal peer mentoring and individual acts of kindness. Now make sure we're not rewarding the acts of kindness, because we know that when you reward, you change the dynamic. You acknowledge acts of kindness, but you don't give the kindness student of the week. Why? Because when you do that, everybody starts looking around to see, is anybody noticing how kind I am? So we have to be wary about our rewards. Individual acts of kindness, because we are wired to connect. We are a social species, and we have to ask in our classrooms, are we interfering with that social drive and desire to connect? What are we doing to let flourish the kindness, the empathy that children very naturally have? When I'm talking about the early years, I've got a little presentation and a little slide that I show of a little 18-month-old who, there's a stranger in the room, and he comes across, he wants to put something in the cupboard, and he keeps banging into the cupboard. Nobody says anything to this little toddler. And the guy's banging into the cupboard, and the little guy just comes out, opens the door, and looks up at him and says, have you got it now? Empathy develops. Empathy develops very early. Imagine that parents and families would be engaged in student learning and school life, and that the school would be a hub for community activity. I would love it if we had this in all of our schools. Imagine similar things for educators. And then we can imagine, if we could collaboratively achieve this vision, what an amazing place Ontario would be for children. and youth to grow and learn with a strong sense. Here we have it again, belonging, meaning, purpose and hope. Can we have them as pillars of education? Well, we know that in September there were some announcements made as well. And many of you who have heard me speak before know that I've been talking about the development of the whole child for a very, very long time. That we have focused way too long on what I've termed the tyranny of cognitive seduction. Isn't that great? I made that up. I made it up. So the tyranny of cognitive seduction is that we think the academic skills of literacy, numeracy and science are really what matter for kids. Well, the science tells us for sure they're important. But what helps children flourish and thrive is their love of learning. And their social and emotional, what they call the soft skills, are the skills that help kids soar. So we're now in a time in Ontario where the ministry is saying and supporting people in thinking about the development of the whole child. So that means in terms of the physical domain, not just paying lip service to having X number of minutes outside. I've got an agenda, I have to tell you, that I bring up whenever I can. We know that children who are literate in terms of their physical well-being, their sleep, their appetite, their eating, their exercise, we know that those kids take care of themselves better. They're healthier. We also know that if you've got good strenuous exercise, it releases stuff in your brain, miracle grow for the brain, BDNF. And so one of the things I say is we have to stop taking away frickin' recess. We need our kids to get out there, burn up, build up those BDNF transmitters and get back in the classroom ready to learn. We need to get out of a system where we punish children. We need to start thinking about children's behaviour as stress behaviour, not misbehaviour, as my friend Stuart Shanker talks about so elegantly in his self-reg work. So we need to be thinking much more intentionally about the physical development of children. The development of abilities in cognition, absolutely. Critical thinking, problem solving, creativity. But I worry, as many of you do, that the way we go about educating children doesn't help them develop these crucial skills. Now, we've got crucial skills called transferable skills now that will be in the new report card that I'll talk about. But one of the things that I worry about is that we're going to add on to the teachers' load and burden that they have to get on to doing these transferable skills, rather than seeing that critical thinking, creativity, they are the door that opens the mind to deep learning. We need to see them not as separate curriculum and competencies, but that the competencies become the curriculum. That's what we'll see over time, I so hope. Socially, we have not paid attention. We help kids, if they can't read, we help them learn to read. If they can't do math, we help them learn math. If they've got some physical disability, we help them function to the best they can. If they've got a behaviour problem, we frickin' punish them. What's with that? If they have a behaviour problem, it means that they've got lagging skills. Kids will do well if they can, not if they want to. I've been a psychiatrist for 30 years. I have not met a kid who said, I want to wake up this morning and be absolutely miserable. No way. Kids will do well if they can, not if they want to. And so, one of the struggles I'm having just now is that our littlest learners are being kicked out of class because of what's been called violent behaviour. And I'm really worried about it, that it's, little 4- and 5-year-olds who are having temper tantrums, who haven't developed self-regulation skills, are being called violent. No, it's not. It's development, not violence. So the language we use is very, very powerful. Our little ones and our teenagers as well are on a journey to learn about self-regulation. Emotional as well is very important for us, of course, to learn about understanding how to recognize, manage and cope with emotions. Are we actually teaching this? Are we modeling this? One of the things that we as advisors are supporting the ministry is looking at the well-being of staff in the school, not just the well-being of the students, because we know that when teachers are healthy, they can bring that to their classrooms. But we also know the other end of it, and that is that there's stress contagion. Dr. Kim Schonert-Reichel out in BC has looked at numerous studies, and she knows that when teachers are burnt out, the cortisol, the stress measured in their students is higher. So we now know much more about the brain. We know that when those stress systems are turned on and not buffered by relationship, shut down your thinking brain. If your stress brain is firing, it takes up all the brain energy, and your thinking brain is not online. So we need to be looking after the well-being of our teachers as well. So I mentioned the Ministry of Education, great team, looking out and asking, what does it mean? What does it mean to have well-being to thousands of people across the province? And what they have identified is what's here. And I hope I'm not getting in trouble by sharing something. No, this is on the website. So, yeah. So, people talk about people being trustees, students, parents, caregivers, caretakers at school. Say that what's important in well-being is having a sense of self and spirit. Having physical and emotional safety, hugely important, over and over and over again for many of our students, particularly those who are marginalised. A sense of belonging. This is something that's very dear to my heart, because many of the students I've worked with over the years have not felt that they belonged at school. You know, me as a shrink said, thank God for the goth movement. Finally, kids had a sense of connection. Meaningful learning experiences. So it's not just about feeling good, it's actually having meaningful learning experiences. Supportive relationship, as well as healthy minds and bodies. Well, you know, just for a plug for my friends here, People for Education, they've also got some pretty neat stuff that they have investigated and identified that all kids, so everybody take a picture of this and tweet it so that Annie can say, look how powerful we are, and she'll get more money. Everybody tweet this one. So, what do they need? Strong foundational skills that support perseverance, adaptability and self-awareness. I go all across the country and people are telling me kids are giving up and giving in more and more easily, younger and younger. Wow! We have to pay attention to that. What is that all about? And maybe in our question period people can share some thoughts on that. Kids need the capacity to communicate, collaborate and imagine solutions to complex problems. You can read these through. They are the heart and the essence, not just of what public education needs to be, but what healthy development needs to be. We need to shift from thinking about education just as covering certain material to education being an immunization and a protection against mental health difficulties. Because, you know, I'm convinced that if we do help our young people with these essential skills, that they will be able to battle many of the challenges that life has to offer them. I'm very worried as a child psychiatrist, and I'll show you some of the statistics, that more and more kids are experiencing anxiety. Now, I don't know yet if they have anxiety disorder, but one of my big worries is they're having anxiety and they're so unused to having a distressing feeling that it's become pathologized. Rather than adults around saying, oh yeah man, I remember when I felt like that. Or didn't you tell me last week that Joey was having a similar kind of thing? So you normalize feelings of anxiety, but most importantly, you help kids develop strategies to cope with it, not IPRC them so that they don't have to write the exam. There are kids with anxiety disorder. Absolutely, I am in no way undermining that reality. But what's happening that we have so many of our kids who are experiencing anxiety and skipping school? One of the things I worry a lot about is this. I did a consultation recently on a little girl who was about 11 years old who was refusing to go to school. The tipping point was her Instagram account didn't get as many likes as her friend did. So she was too embarrassed to go to school. Well, do you know what? That is something we can absolutely do something about. We can help develop these skills in children. We know how to do it. But what we value is what we measure. And what we measure is what we value. So we need to be in the business of saying, this is important enough for us to learn more about it. So we have an early years curriculum that's absolutely fantastic. I'm a little bit biased about it, mind you. And in this early years curriculum, I think we need to see these foundations go up, not just for K to 3, but onwards and upwards. My friend Jim Grieve, who was the ADM in the early years division, said, first we take kindergarten, then we take grade 1. Then we take grade 2. Why is that? Because these foundations are at the heart of education, a sense of belonging when you're connected to others and you're making a contribution to the world. Engagement, you're excited and interested about what you're learning. Engagement, a sense of well-being, as well as an ability to express. We have limited our kids' expression. We've limited that to what we count and measure. Children have 100 different languages, and we limit their expression so narrowly. So what about imagine a school where the focus is on the conditions for learning and the competencies that kids need to do well. So again, here's a plug. People for Education has done tons of research on this. But our government, the ministry, is now looking at transferable skills. And I don't know what it's going to look like. I'm not involved in that. But the critical thinking that kids are going to need to be developing, that starts in kindergarten. That starts early. Innovation and creativity. If any of you haven't seen Sir Ken Robinson's TED Talk from 2006 on creativity and how we're actually killing it in our schools, so important. Imagination. We are going to have challenges that only our adolescent brains are going to have the creativity to solve. If you want a solution to a sticky, wicked problem, ask a teenager. Why? Because they've got brilliant minds that haven't been inhibited by failure yet. It's great. Well, except when it's not. It's great. But you know what I mean. Right? So these are such important competencies, but here's the challenge. Here's the challenge. How can we balance the development of these competencies and bring it into and through the curriculum that's being covered? So, there is being a refresh done on the curriculum. But I want you to listen really, really closely to Nancy's panel coming up and see how in the management and the stories that she's going to tell show us how these competencies can very naturally be what education is about. You know, Socrates or Plutarch or one of those wise old men back in the day said that education is more about lighting the fire than filling the pail. We need to get back to that. It's more about lighting the fire than filling the pail. But you know, I saw a TED Talk recently by Will Richardson, and it was very stark because he said, here are the conditions for powerful learning. Safe environment, personal investment, real-world application. Look at it, fun, passion, a real audience, teachers as mentors. These are powerful conditions for learning. They're amazing. When you think of a positive environment, interesting questions. You know, Winston Churchill, he was given a very bad time in school, and one of the things he said was the problem with examinations is they ask me questions, but not the ones that I know the answers to. Right? So what in fact people never say are powerful learning is sitting in rows, 45-minute blocks, one-size curriculum, you get the picture, right? Someone else's question, standardized assessment, no choice, no agency, lack of relevance. Now, I watched this a couple of times, and each time I watch it, I think of, oh my goodness, how are we in still this world? How can we imagine? How can we say, I want something different? Well, I must say, I'm so taken by the fact that this ministry is taking us in new directions. I actually originally called this talk To Boldly Go, where no man has gone before, or no woman. But you know, what you think affects how you feel, affects how you act. I recently heard, just the other night, about a little grade 1 boy who is having weekly spelling tests, who has to come home every night and practice spelling. Well, what he really wants to do is make this amazing robotics Lego where he's got interconnections. The other day he was saying to his mum, you know, Mum, I think this is one we're going to have to video. This kid has amazing competencies. When he goes to Ottawa, he said to his mummy, I want to learn how to spell Parliament Hill. He's not interested in weekly spelling tests doing spam. No, spam was one of the words. Which, of course, now, because I have a degree in music, I have Monty Python. Spam, 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 spam. Now, you all have it stuck in your brain too. Oh, no, oh, no. So, but what we think affects how we feel, affects how we act. And, you know, I'm very privileged to work with Dr. Carl James. And we're really looking at and thinking about equity. And you know, our mindset makes a huge, huge difference. A mindset, and that's the psychology of learning and achievement. And this wonderful Scottish site, the Centre for Confidence and Wellbeing, talks lots about it. But we have to think that people are made, not born. We have to think that children have massive competencies and capabilities. And you know, when you really think about those transferable skills, again, when you really think about them and say, if we focused our attention on these transferable skills, would we not find that those who are not as academically inclined are then free to bring what they're good at to the classroom? If we think about developing communication and collaboration and showing how kids can and will do that, are we not going to be more equal in our classrooms? Rather than saying you're only at level 6 and you need to be at level 18 by the time we come out, so we say you have to be like everybody else, rather than saying, well, tell me, what do you know? Our Indigenous children very often fall, in terms of our standardised testing, fall behind. But we don't think culturally enough about what they are learning. We know that oral language counts, it matters hugely. But many of our Indigenous communities, they say, you know, you're given 2 ears and only 1 mouth for a reason. That what we're testing is how they mouth rather than what they've heard and what they understand. So we need to be thinking differently. Our expectations need to be altered, not lowered. And think that there are ways to light that fire, but they're different ways. So what we want is our kids to develop an academic mindset. That I belong in this academic community. My ability and competence grow with my effort. I can succeed at this. And this work has value for me. Well, you know what? When you have a sense of belonging, engagement, expression, and well-being, bang, you get all of this. Okay, so what are some of the crucial messages that we need to be giving kids? Well, this is important. You can do it, and I won't give up on you. This is important. You can do it. I won't give up on you. So, you know, as we're reviewing assessment, we really have to be thinking about these crucial messages. We also need to be thinking about the power of failure. The power of failure. I'll be speaking next week at Quest, and Michael Unger, the resiliency researcher, is going to be the last keynote speaker, or last morning. And you know, Michael talks about too safe for their own good. That we're bubble wrapping our kids. That we're not allowing them to experience failure. Now, I don't want kids to experience failure and be devastated. I want kids to experience failure and to be caught. To be held in the metaphorical arms of people who care about their learning. We now know from the work that Joe Bowler talks about in mathematical mindsets that when you actually have made a mistake, your brain is differently wired for learning. There is a moment, a change in the chemistry of your brain that says, wow, I need to learn something here. So, messages with mistake. And instead, what we do is we tell kids, oh man, you're so smart. You are so smart. I was blown away when I read Carol Dweck's research on mindset that showed that kids who are told they're smart all the time give up more easily. That what we need to be saying to kids is, man, you've tried really hard here. We need to be acknowledging their effort, not their smarts. So the time when students are most susceptible to messages is when they're failing. And so the feedback that we give, the feedback and the feed forward, is so crucially important. But there was a study that really profoundly affected my thinking on this. And it was one where it was one where they said, I'm giving you these comments. So there was two groups of students. One got, here are the corrections, I think you can do better. And the other had another post-it on it that said, I'm giving you these comments because I have very high expectations and I know that you can reach them. So what's that about? Well, what happened was the kids who got the, I know you can reach them, I have high expectations, they handed this work in. They wanted to do more. They had a growth mindset and they thrived. The other kids didn't do nearly as much. What is that? Now, does this mean that now we go about sticking little posters on? No, that's not the point. We're not into the post-it world. We're into authentic communication about caring. Authentic communication about caring, how kids do. So I talk about in an article that I wrote for the ministry about how much are we spending our time connecting with kids, actually having them feel felt by us. And that is a crucial role that teachers need to figure out. And I'll say the parallel process, principals and teachers need to figure out the relationship and how they can also feel felt. That you're important to me, what you do makes a difference. So how much are we connecting and how much are we correcting and redirecting? We as adults and parents in kids' lives are the great party poopers of their life. Just think about a typical day. How much are you connecting and how much are you correcting or redirecting what they do? So I want to just quickly nip now, because I want time for questions. So I'm cutting out some of my stuff. I want to now talk about why do we really need to pay attention to this. And here's some of the research that's been collected. So CAMH does a big Ontario student drug use and health survey, and what they are finding in the latest one in 2016. That more than a third of our children are describing moderate to serious psychological distress. Now, one of the things that worries me about these numbers is the survey is completed by young people whose parents have given them permission. It's still an active consent process. So there's a huge number of kids who have not answered this survey. So I guess 34%, a third of our kids, is a low estimate. We know from other research that the number of kids arriving at the emergency room with intense anxiety as well as self-harming behaviour has gone through the roof in the past couple of years. So my colleagues and friends, and there are other statistics there, my colleagues and friends at the Offord Centre have been involved in the school mental health survey. And so it's a really great survey. It really wants to look and deepen our understanding of the association between school and classroom environments and student mental health. So they're getting into the really nitty-gritty, and they want to disentangle the effect of poverty, school and family environments and other things. So they have looked at thousands and thousands of kids, anonymous surveys that they've done, teachers, students, as well as principals. So some of the highlights of it are that they find that kids are reporting, 11% of the children are reporting that they need professional help. 29% report that they experience significant psychological distress. 11% say, I need help, and guess what? They're not getting it. But part of it is they're not turning to others for help. And that worries me just as much. It worries me just as much that they don't see the adults in their lives as being able to support them through this. We need to shift that. And that's the work that my friend Kathy Short in School Mental Health is doing so profoundly. But you know, when you look at what can we do about emotional and behavioural difficulties? Look at these slides. So what these slides along the bottom is relationship quality, asking the kids, asking the principals about relationship quality. And when you have high, you see those, the green bar there, when you have high school quality of relationships, the emotional difficulties go down. If when you look at the school level, what the administrators report is even higher when you look at the kids. When you look at behavioural difficulties, so the externalising, what you see is a similar thing. School relationship makes a difference. We need to be focusing on well-being. We need to be focusing on the relationships that kids have. This one, I think, is so powerful. It shows that when you are poor, you're in a lower SES, so that's that top line. You have more behavioural difficulties in a low school climate of quality of relationships. But look at that. If you are in a school where there are high quality of relationships, man oh man, you have fewer externalising behaviours than the well-to-do kids have in poor quality. Do you see that? This is profound. So to finish, relationships matter. Relationships matter. And so what does it look like? How can you help promote this sense of well-being? Well, it's about having meaningful relationships, knowing your students, genuine connection, know what they are interested in, systemic, explicit and intentional, welcoming, including, understanding, promoting and partnering. This is from, you can Google and find this, School Mental Health Assist, Mentally Healthy Classrooms. Fantastic resources. It's all about relationships, relationships, relationships. And then, you know, what is it that kids need to do well? What they need to do well is have a warm welcome, a smile, a chance to learn, a safe place to risk, and a connection to a caring adult every single day. You know, the Cherokee tell the tale of all. We have two wolves in us. One is loving and kind and generous, and one is angry and mean and shallow. And one of the children in front of the grandfather says, which one wins? He says, it depends which one you feed. We are in an Ontario that has a very different intentionality about what we are feeding not only our students, but our teachers and our administrators. So it's our task, through People for Education and our other voices, to support and make sure that the feeding continues to be the healthiest it can be. So I'm going to stop there and say thank you very much for your great attention here this morning.